G'day, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Mindful Men podcast. My name is Simon Rennie, and I'm the man behind Mindful Men. I'm really excited today. I've got Conrad Tracey from Victoria, Australia, and he's leading the Addiction Coaching Australia. G'day, Conrad. How are you?
Hey Simon, I'm really well. Very happy to be here. I've been really looking forward to meeting you. I've been chatting with you on on the social, so it's good to put a face to the name. And I'm quite envious of your tan,
it's the
the
Queensland
Queensland
tan.
tan.
Thank you for joining me. I know it's Sunday afternoon. Appreciate your time in a time where most people are relaxing, getting ready for the week. So it's great to have you on. So this is the Mindful Men podcast, and the whole purpose of the podcast is to open up a safe space for men to talk about things that are on their mind, or how they become who they are today. And I know you've got an addiction background, and that's what you're about with Addiction Coaching Australia. So for the listeners
Yeah,
out there, I'd love to hear a bit about your story and how maybe where you grew up, family, friends, what your interests are, and how you came to be where you are today.
absolutely. And I think the when I saw what you were doing, I was so drawn to it because it's exactly what we need. And I wish, right, that when I was younger, like, 12 to 18, that I had more access to these type of resources. So really happy to kind of dig into it. And I guess like the first important thing, and I've looked at this and I know that it was hard for me. It was a challenge, right? And this is what we're talking about. It's like, how do we navigate life and do it with, um, you know, connection to our heart, our body, and our mind, rather than connection to, aggression, shutting down, not communicating. So for me, I was born in Hong Kong, and my mother is British Australian. So she left Australia, went to Hong Kong, met my father. I came here when I was 5, and it was a big cultural shift. Like I went to a British primary school, so I spoke good English, and but yeah, like moving from like Hong Kong to like Bayswater, in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, was a big cultural shift. I don't know what the Brisbane equivalent would be or the Queensland equivalent, um, but yeah, it was very different. And that was the first point where I realized I was different. You know, in Hong Kong, there was like people from all over the world. There was people, from every race and every culture, and we just kind of hung out and all got along. And when I got to Australia, I really felt that I felt different. I felt like I was not part of. Um, so it took me a little bit of took me a while to kind of acclimatize. And look, I've spoken about this, and I guess it's a really important part of my story. Like, unfortunately, I went to live in Bayswater there, and I was there for about a year. Um, it was always going to be temporary for us. We were looking at buying a house somewhere else, and I think a few people cottoned onto that. And unfortunately, like there was some people there that didn't have the best intentions. Um, and for me, I was the victim of a very severe sexual assault during my time there, and that was it. Just kind of added insult to injury for me, right? I was like, new country, finding my feet. Yeah, I did make some friends. My parents were struggling as well. They're like, what's going on? How do we make it all work? That kind of happened, and I think it was so full on for me that I couldn't compute it. I didn't understand what had happened. So I just kind of repressed it in my memory. And, if you talk to people that knew me, they would say I changed, right? So I went from a very happy, vicarious, buoyant kind of young kid to someone who was very shut down, very scared, very angry, and I just didn't know which way was up. And I guess that was the start. So ended up in Blackburn, you know, which was a cool thing. Had heaps of friends. I was lucky. I've always been good at stuff, right? Like good at sport, pretty good at school, good at making friends. Like I was doing well in certain aspects of my life, right? But there was a side of me that kept on attaching to pain. There was a side of me that kept on attaching to fear and kept on attaching to danger. So I was, you know, I kind of started really early in primary school and, you know, doing well on one trajectory or one pathway and hanging around with people that I shouldn't have been all the other time, right? It's like I was compelled or drawn to it. And that continued. Like I did that all through primary school, all through high school. And the things that kept me out of trouble, you know, were music, sport, very supportive family here. And I was doing okay, right? And then, you know, unfortunately, some of the things that happened around that time, even they derailed me further. So like I said, on paper looks good, but on the weekends I was hanging around with people that were getting arrested, you know, like going into juvenile, getting good behavior bonds, people turning 18 and then going to jail, and really just getting into it, you know. And I saw some things around that age that really were hard, you know, like, and I'm not talking about petty things. I'm talking about like, you know, more sexual assault, murder, people dying, people killing themselves. It was fucking hectic. Like, excuse my French, you know, for someone that was of my age, and that was my reality. So, like, everyone around me was like getting hurt, getting robbed, dying, going to jail, getting addicted to heroin. That was a real problem in Melbourne around that time. I managed to avoid it because I was like, no, I've got to go to like lacrosse training and go play drums and you know, kick about with my healthy mates. Yeah, because I had two. And look, I continued through there, ended up going to you know, high school, did well, always struggled with relationships, particularly with men. And I've said this before, like I used to want to compete with them or fight them. Very aggressive, like pretty violent at times. Like that was my go-to on anything that I couldn't solve, is I would fight it out. Really struggled just to connect. So I had lots of friends that were women. And unfortunately, like, you know, I destroyed all of those relationships as well because I would end up, you know, turning those into sexual relationships. So at the end of it, I was just isolated. Don't have many friends left from that high school period, right? Because I alienated them all. And I didn't do it knowingly. I just did it because I didn't really know how to function. And I've thought about that a lot. I went to university, did a music degree, ended up doing a psychology degree. And when I was at uni, I was partying a lot, right? And I mention the sexual trauma because I think this was the key thing for me. It's like I could never figure out how to connect with myself. I never knew how I felt. I never knew which way was up. I didn't know who I was. And, you know, I kind of discovered ecstasy early on. I mean, I smoked a bit of pot, but I never really liked it. I just thought it was a pretty shit drug. Ecstasy was great because I felt incredible, right? I felt connected to my heart. I felt like connected to people. I wanted to go and talk and be outgoing. And it really took me out of my shell. And I just did heaps of it. So like in between my two degrees, I was going out like Thursday night and I wouldn't come home until, you know, Sunday late or Monday morning. It was like 4 days every weekend, just partying and partying and partying. And again, fell in with another crew of people who didn't have my my best interests at heart, and again was leading a double life. The pills turned into speed, which turned into, you know, cocaine, which turned into methamphetamines, right? So really developed quite a deliberate and well-established drug addiction by the time I was probably 25,
Wow.
right? And yeah, and that went on for like 10 years. Um, until I I had a successful career, right? I owned a couple of businesses. I ended up going to work for some great, really forward-thinking companies in property and startup. And I just couldn't manage my addiction and my life together. So, like, fast forward a fair bit, just because I'm conscious of time. When I really fell off my perch was about 2017, right? So managed to, kind of fake it, do the double life, get through everything, partying a lot, couple of degrees, heaps of damage behind me, like relationships, people. You meet anyone that knew me in like 1990s to 2010, and they won't speak highly of me, right? They'll be like, that guy's he's a jerk, belligerent, arrogant, bit of a cockhead, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And when I got to my worst, I was using around 2 to 3 grams of cocaine a day. I was smoking methamphetamines every single day, so I couldn't function without it. I'd get up and I'd just use. And I was still holding down a full-time job. And I ended up, behaving like a moron at work, offering drugs to people and just doing really stupid things that I shouldn't have done in a leadership position, and ended up, in rehab, and without a job. So basically that was the conditions, like, you need to wrap up here and you need to go get yourself some help, and we're going to help you to do that. Went into rehab, thought I knew everything, like sitting there just like, who are you to tell me what to do? Why should I listen to you? Don't you know who I am? That type of attitude. I got into a really serious altercation with someone there, and one of the counselors realized that my anger, which was like a 15 out of 10, it was bigger than the argument, right? And I've said this recently on some social posts, like, that person was the first person that helped me to discover that I had gone through that sexual trauma, right, with hypnotherapy. And that was one of the greatest reliefs of my life, like realizing that, like I'd caused this massive trail of havoc. I'd hurt myself. I'd hurt people that love me. My brain was a bit fried, and I didn't know why I had done it. So, like, getting to the realization that I had been the victim of that, it gave me some clarity around the work that I needed to do to get better. At the time I went to rehab, like, my family were done, my girlfriend was done, work was done. Like, I was on my own, and it was the last opportunity I had. So I grasped it with both hands, and I gave it everything. Did the traditional stuff like NA, and I basically did what I was told. Worked through that recovery process, and decided to look. What I'll say is this: like, I always like to improve things, right? I like things to be better. And I was going through that recovery process, and I was like, this is cool. It's working. Like, I'm not using drugs. I'm reconnected to my family. I'm reconnected to my friends. I'm dealing with my sexual trauma. I'm doing all of this holistic stuff. Like, I'm happy, but it could be better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So understanding that some of the fellowships around for, Alcoholics Anonymous and NA and all of that stuff, they were designed kind of in the 50s, right? And they're community based. There's not a lot of trained professionals in that realm. And look, like I said, it worked for me. It was really good. But then I was thinking, like, what about designing something different, right? Designing something that would be prevalent or useful for people in 2022. And the things that I looked for were like, I was like, what if I could build something for me? What would it look like? Right. So, like, I was mindful of my privacy. I didn't want to leave work, although I kind of had to. I might have had a family at that point, and I wanted the best possible care. and I wanted really, really smart, up to date, current information, and I wanted it delivered in a way that I could access. Right, so I wanted to be able to do it on my computer and on my phone and on the internet, basically. So I went about. I had managed to get myself re-employed. I was working in commercial property. It was okay, it was a job, and I just decided that there was something else for me to be doing. So I was working with a high performance coach, amazing guy called Stephen Scott Johnson, as part of my professional development at work. And I'm like, I really want to design this thing, and I want to help people because like I like the job I have now, but I don't really like the work. I just like helping people and getting them, helping to lift them up. And he said, well, why don't you design something? And I guess out of that, Addiction Coaching Australia was born 2018, 2019. And it has been an incredible journey since then. So at the moment, I am, I guess, the director and founder of Addiction Coaching Australia. And I do other things, but I'm very, very picky about what I do.
Yeah.
Okay. So like Addiction Coaching Australia is the key focus. As part of that work, I do work with individuals and groups, which we can talk about later on. And I also work with some of Australia's best companies to help train them and teach them about substance misuse in the workplace and how to effectively deal with it. And I spend a couple of hours a week working for the person that helped me uncover my sexual trauma. Okay. And I'm very mindful of that. And I'm doing it because I love her and I love what she did for me. So she operates one of Melbourne's best private rehabs. So I go there on a Tuesday afternoon and I do a group coaching with the cohort there. Okay. So it's a nice mixture of things.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's a powerful story that is a lot of heartache and hurt and pain and suffering, but also growth in yourself and discovery and recovery as well. So it's got the down, but it's certainly got the up. And I really appreciate you sharing that for our audience as well. And during your story there, you mentioned like living this double life. And I'm from the mental health space and you're from the addiction space, which both interlock very regularly, go hand in hand. But growing up and what you experienced at 5 and then going through school, did your family, were they aware of this? Was this something that you shut down and you kept this internally? Like, did you have any support around you regarding what happened when you were 5?
No, and that's the thing. It's like, like being immigrants, and I think this was like prevalent with like all my mates as well. Like our parents, they were scrambling. Like my mum was working 15-hour days. My dad was doing the same. Like they were so focused on building a life here, that, we were kind of left to our own devices. And I had a bit of a social group that was like that. And like I said, I repressed my trauma. And one thing I will say about my folks is that they're kind of old fashioned, right? Doctors, like you don't need them. There's nothing wrong with you. Just, that kind of old school thinking where, you don't need access to services. And like I said, it just manifested in the way I behaved. And I think my parents were completely bemused. They're like, he has what he needs. He's good at stuff. He's got friends. He's quite popular. He looks okay, but he's so fucked. And they just couldn't reconcile it. And I think what they put it down to was like acclimatization. They blamed it on my friends. So it was like the people that were influencing me. And that was tough. And also I had really severe ADHD. Right. It was just, so it's been like, it was a really tough journey. And it's been remarkable the growth that I've seen, since I did get better. So yeah, I think it was just like, they didn't know, I didn't know, we didn't have the resources, nothing like it, it didn't exist. Like the thought of sending your kid to a psychologist in, 15 years ago was very, I think
Unheard
that was
of.
only kind of
Yeah.
happening in like Beverly Hills and stuff, right? It wasn't happening in Box Hill.
No, certainly not. And you also mentioned something like putting when you're building addiction coaching Australia, or building
Yeah.
something for you or with that you could have had and or used way back when. And that's something I also holds dear to my heart when I'm telling my story and we're doing Mindful Men. And it was a very similar story. Like I bottled it all up for 20 years.
Mm,
I only had recent discussions with my folks about what I've been going through. They had no idea really. Well,
yeah.
if they did, they haven't told me. So everything I'm designing, whether it's a podcast, it's an Instagram post, whether it's a business that I'm developing on the side, it's trying to target the younger me and the help that I wished I had back then, and now I'm trying to be that person who could help that younger me as well. So tell us a bit more about Addiction Coaching Australia and what was the thing that how did it start? How did it evolve? And how has it grown since I think it was at 2018 that you started?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been pretty crazy. Like the thing that was the most powerful for me, like in my recovery journey, was my relationship with my sponsor. Incredible man. Like I owe him, a lot. Although I did the work, so I do give myself credit for that. That daily connection, having someone that believed in me, was like there for me, didn't judge me. Like I've told this man things that I've never told another person in
Yeah.
the world, and I trust him wholeheartedly. So that was the core of it for me. I was like, how can I be that person for others? Right. So the first program I designed was the Delta Path. And it's called the Delta Path because the Delta brainwave is my favorite brainwave. It's about deep rest and regeneration. I also like the shape of it. It kind of goes up, which is what we want to do, right? I want to get on that trajectory. So I designed that and started coaching men and women. I work with all people, right? And that's another thing. I'm really big on like inclusivity and, like creating safe places for people to get well, regardless of how they identify. So the Delta Path was one-on-one coaching. So I work with people for 8 weeks. We do behavioral change. I spend a lot of time with them, talk to them every single day, accountabilities, and you really develop a relationship, right? And this is something that you'll never do with a psychologist or a psychiatrist. They've got such firm boundaries around things. And maybe I should have firmer ones, but I do what I do and I love it. And then at the same time, so during the 8 weeks you're working with me, you're also seeing a hypnotherapist, a nutritionist, a mindful movement specialist. So it was like everything that I did in my recovery packaged into this amazing 8-week program. And I think, like I've put a bunch of people through it and they've all done pretty well, right? There's a couple that kind of didn't do it for the right reasons or whatever and didn't really do the work, but the ones that have done the work are really, really thriving. And I have a group of those people now that I spend a lot of time with. Like I went camping last weekend to Walhalla and 5 of those guys came with me. So it's like they've gone through that program and then they go into a group that of all the people that have completed it. Okay. Yeah. And then like that was going well, but I was like, I can only do a certain amount of people every year. And I'll be honest with you, it's not accessible for everyone in terms of cost. Okay. It's expensive. I think it's really, really great value, but it's a lot of money. Yeah. And I was like thinking, well, how do I help more people and how do I make what I do more accessible to people who may not be able to afford that level of care? Understanding that I'm a private service, I'm not Medicare or, private health or anything like that. So I built a group coaching program, which we're into the 3rd cohort of that now, and that runs every 8 weeks. Yeah. So we do that online and I cap it at around 10 people per cohort. We've got 2 coaches in there, so myself and Coach Lily. And people that come into that, they get a complete curriculum of video guides, worksheets. There's a private Facebook group, and we do 2 meetings a week. So Wednesday night knowledge session, and then a Sunday night debrief where people get to hang out and talk about what has happened and what's coming up. So they're the kind of 2 things I'm doing along with the corporate work. And I guess the next step for us is to take that group coaching model outside of Australia. So I've certainly been talking to a few people in New Zealand and just people with the right time zones. And yeah, that's kind of, where we're at the moment. So it's gone from one-on-one coaching to, a higher level of one-on-one coaching, group coaching, online communities. And then, after those programs, people are able to stay in the community ongoing for a long period of time. And for me, there's another cool thing I'm doing as well, which I always forget about, which is super cool. It's called Impulse Addiction.ai. So I am building a AI-based application to help people break the cycle of addiction. So basically, it's a digital therapeutics company. I'm doing that with a co-founder in Sydney, and our MVP is about 3 weeks away from test, which is great. And it's a relapse prevention tool. So it's something that people can engage with every day to help them to make better choices around behavior and addictions. So yeah, there's a lot going on.
It is. You mentioned corporate world as well. What's some of the stuff you do with corporate?
So look, I have to be mindful of names. But at the moment, I'm just about to do some work for one of Australia's leading property companies. Yeah. So a development company. And they have a new charter around, I guess it's like a B Corp status. Right? So the things that they need to do about the way their building operates, the way their training operates, the way their procedures operate, the way their banking operates, to make sure that they're doing things in a very forward-thinking and ethical way. And a big part of that is providing training around mental health to their staff and their team members. Yeah. So I'm doing a series of online videos educating people about substance misuse. And that will go into a library, which will be available to everybody that works there. And that's really, really great because you get to go in and help. And I also do, I guess, crisis work. Mm-hmm. So some of the people that I work with are working in really big roles. And they have a lot of responsibility and a lot of people depending on them. So sometimes, when things happen, I go in and mediate. And I work out a solution for the employer and the employee to make sure that everybody does the right thing. The person gets the support. The company manages it in the best possible way for the best possible outcome for me and that for everyone. And for me, that's the person returning to work. Yeah. Okay. Not getting thrown out or fired or, demoted. It's like, let's create time, let's create space, let's build a plan, and let's get them back.
Wow. Such great work, such a broad areas you're working in and doing lots of stuff. What really I liked about all the things you are is that sense of community and inclusiveness and not just having a program that finishes and then the participants are left to their own devices. You're forward thinking with the camping trip. You're forward thinking with the app that you're looking at as well, and it's keeping them together and keeping them supported, and even into the workplace with developing procedures and stuff, which is the most boring thing to do in the world if anyone's ever done it. I've done a bit of it myself in my line of work, and I've seen a bit of it as well. But yeah, putting you behind that and creating that holistic approach, whether someone's in the corporate world, if they're on the streets, if they're in some of the industries that you've worked in is just fantastic. And thank you for putting it together as, drawing on your own experience to create this amazing, business that supports people. It just must be really fulfilling for you. Would you say that?
It is. It's so fulfilling. I'm a big, one of the things I really love is life by design. And I think that when I came through that recovery process of being I was at complete rock bottom, it's not even a question. I was definitely there. Yeah. I was hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, psychosis, poor physical health, broken relationships. And what I realized is that when you're really well, really, really well, and you're really connected and you're really being honest, you go on this trajectory and you get back up to kind of parity where society functions. Yeah. And you can get back up there and then, you know, you're not being judged and you don't feel like, so sad anymore. What happens with people who really embrace recovery, and I've seen this a lot, is that they break through that glass barrier, and they do incredible things, right? Because I wasted a lot of time, right? So I'm very driven, I'm very motivated, I'm very goal focused, and I want to do massive things. I'm not interested in doing small things. I want big impact. And for me, my greatest wish was that I could have rolled it all out on day one, all right? But I started where I started, and the digital aspect of what we're doing now, the only barrier to entry for that is a smartphone, right? The app at its basic level will be free, right? And obviously, I have, you know, a freemium model, or we have a freemium model, and, you know, a full suite of digital therapeutics that we want to build into it. But anyone can use it, right? And then the next tier is like group coaching, which is much more affordable and accessible, really high level learning, great community, heaps of privacy still. And then there's the next bit. And the beautiful thing about it is that the next bit is not as much as it costs to go to like a private rehab. I love the one where I work because I think it's fair, but you've got people like charging like 40, 50, 60, $90,000 a month, right? For inpatient rehabilitation. Like, do they have like 10 gurus working there? Like, does God work there with all the answers? Like, it doesn't matter how fancy it is. Like, there's got to be a cap to what it costs them to operate it and run it, right? So I think there's a lot of greed in that industry. I'll call it out. You know, I'm cool to call it out. There are some people doing it really well. And then at the bottom end of the scale, it's a shitstorm. Like, there's 2-year waiting lists for rehabs. Like, people are dying and suffering, you know, incredibly hard or incredible hardship and mental health, right? So I'm trying to fill a gap, and I'm trying to do it all on my own. Like, I don't take funding. I don't have, you know, and you know why? Because I don't have the time. Like, I'm sure I could have got 1,000,000 grants, but I'm just like, I'm not doing it. I just want to keep on moving forward. And I built revenue, right? I reinvested. I built revenue. I reinvest. You know, Impulse is completely self-funded. And like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you how much it costs to build an internet or an iPhone application, but it's a lot of money.
Can imagine.
Yeah, and it's like, that's my money, and that's my co-founder's money, and we've put it back into helping people, and that's what we do. And you know, like, it has just been so rewarding. Like, the things that I get to do and see and connect with in my life, it just, you wouldn't believe it. Like, watching people regain their life and realize that, you know, the sky is really the limit is one of the best feelings in the world. And I do it every day. I also deal with incredible, you know, pain and loss and suffering. And, you know, for me, like, I've had to ramp up my personal well-being, like about 100. I only really work like 3 or 4 days a week. And the rest of the time is like for me to look after myself and the people around me, you know.
You touch on self-care there, and you know, you've done a psychology background. I've just finished my master's of social work last year, and I'm assuming in psychology it's the same, where it's all about separating yourself from the person in front of you, separating your story from theirs, not divulging too much about you in trying to help them, because it's not about you and it's about them. But I've seen plenty of psychologists in my time, and the ones that I connect with, and I've worked with clients as well in my social work stuff, in the mental health space, is that the ones where I say, you know what, I've experienced anxiety, I've experienced depression, I've got obsessive compulsive disorder. And for yourself, you know, do you share that your journey with your clients and say, look, I've sat in your shoes and I've had addiction, and I can only assume if you do that, it just creates a better bond with the client and more trust, and you can go deeper into things. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, totally. And it's like, it's an analogy. Like, I play drums, right? And I'm obsessed with it and I love it. And when I go to get a drum lesson, I don't go and find the best person that knows everything about the theory of drums,
Mm.
right? I go and I find the best drummer in Australia or in the world, and I go, hey, let's have a lesson, right?
Yeah.
I need your experience, I need your wisdom, I need your guidance. And guidance is the key thing. I don't give advice to people, yeah? And I give guidance on it. And the thing that I think people are attracted to is that they want to know that you know what it feels like,
Yeah.
right? And it's not just words. So like when somebody says to me, you know, like, I went on a meth bender and I did this and I acted like this and my wife found out, and, you know, I know what that feels like,
Mm.
right? I've done that thing and I've had to sit down and have that hard conversation, and I've had the relationship breakdown, and I've suffered all of the ramifications, right? And I don't say to a person, well, when that happened to me, I did this, so you must do that, right? Which I see a lot of in NA, and it really pisses me off, right? And there's so much ego in that. What I do is I say, hey, this happened to me, and this was the approach that I took. What can you take from that? And if you've got any questions, and, you know, like, I'll tell you now, the people that work and do my program, they also work with GPs, they work with psychologists, psychiatrists. Like, we're pulling in every piece of knowledge and resource that we can, right? And I'm the first person to say, if I don't have the answers, I send them to the person that does. And they absolutely connect with it, right? Because without that, it's just pens and papers and words and books, you know?
Yeah. And what about so you mentioned drums. So
Mm.
you hear a lot of these stories, and obviously people in the helping professions, psychology, social workers, psychiatry, etc., etc. Sometimes
Yeah.
we forget our own self-care,
Mm.
even though we talk about it a lot. But you do the drums. What else do you do for self-care? What does self-care look like in a week for you?
Yeah. So one of the things I'm very, very obsessed with is planning and routine. And I do this thing called planning your week from the inside out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the first, I build it like a cross. Okay. So like appointments go in between, like in Wednesday lunchtime, and then they go up to the top of Wednesday, down to the bottom of Wednesday, and then I start filling out 11 till 3 on other days if I have to, right? And I have very dedicated days for doing certain things. So like Tuesday, Wednesday, client facing, Mondays, admin. And look, there's, you know, they're focus days and rest days, and it's very, very well planned. Yeah. And it's more than getting organized. Like, this is high level stuff that I've done with, you know, incredible coaches and incredible people that are very, very successful. Because I'm constantly on that learning journey, right? I still have a coach. I'm dialed into some of the most amazing resources in terms of people all over the world. And one of the key things I do, I'm pretty religious about this, and not in a religious way. I get up early, right? And like 5:30 till 7:30 every day, that's my time, right? Anybody that follows me on Instagram will go, yep, that's Conrad's time, right? That's the meditation, the reading, the exercise, you know, making coffee. And I don't just make coffee, like I'm really into it. I've got like the AeroPress, and I grind my beans. And, you know, one of the deepest passions for me in terms of self-care is my music, right? Because creativity is where the gold happens. That's where the thinking occurs. That's where the connection to the heart occurs. And that's my release. I can really be myself on a stage. And I love and cherish that, right? Exercise. I used to be like really into hardcore exercise, like, you know, doing CrossFit and Tough Mudder and all of that stuff. And I don't connect with it. I'm not that hyper masculine type of guy. And I can't do it, right? I'm pretty strong, like I can deadlift and do all of that stuff, but it's just not for me. So like for me now, running is the thing that it's an incredible passion, right? So I mean, this week I did 24 Ks on yesterday, 10 on Wednesday and 6 on Monday. So I'm training for the Great Ocean Road Marathon on the 15th of May. Meditation every single day. learning every single day. Like these are non-negotiables. Running, drumming, and then I have a day a week, right? And look, I know, like, sometimes I tell people like this and they're like, oh, you're part-timer, blah, blah, blah. You know, like I work so much, right? But what I've managed to do is I've kind of cleared like 9 till 4 one day a week, and that's my time. Okay. And I do whatever I want to do in it. Typically what I will do is I'll go get some Reiki, I'll get a massage, I'll go into the outdoors, right? So connecting with nature, connecting with water, and trying to connect with people as well, to have conversations that aren't always me listening and guiding. Sometimes I need to talk to people. I have an amazing psychologist at Bloke Psychology in Cheltenham. Incredible guy. So yeah, it's like health, nutrition, hydration, learning, meditation, exercise, creativity, time and space, right? And also like holistic well-being. I'm you know, I've done it all, like traditional Chinese medicine, body work. Like I went to a flotation tank yesterday. That was cool. You know?
Cool. I haven't done that yet. It's on my my wish list.
Yeah, you could say I'm like obsessed. I'm obsessed with like well-being.
Yeah. Have you been like this for a long time, or is this a relatively new thing for you? Or
it started in my recovery, right? So I used to put myself last all the time, working like incredibly long hours, running 2 companies, taking a lot of drugs, like not looking after my mental, physical health. You know, I had like $20,000 worth of damage to my teeth by the time I was, you know, finished with my methamphetamine addiction. And I learnt about self-care and recovery, right? And now it is there's not a higher priority in my life, right, than looking after me, because I can't pour from an empty cup. And what I try and do is share that with everyone, is that you've got to get, you know, you've got to charge up before you can do anything. So yeah, it's like, it's been a gradual process and it's been an exploration. And I have tried lots of things, and I've very, very comfortable now with my well-being routine. I should actually talk about it.
yeah,
You've prompted me.
do it. Let's hear it.
That's the next video.
Do it. And I love how you use this word exploration with self-care and wellness. And, you know, you think about blokes culture in Australia. And for me, growing up, I grew up in the northern suburbs of Adelaide, pretty rough, working class style area. Yep. And self-care was footy on the weekend, or you know, basketball, cricket, athletics. It was sport. There was no such thing as, you wouldn't think about yoga or going for a massage. Guys wouldn't think about going for a massage. Guys wouldn't do anything. Pretty much, you're going to the footy club, you're getting on a piss on the weekend, or whatever you're doing. That's self-care. But as I've grown older, you know, and I hit burnout in 2020, and I've told the story a few times, where I got into men's yoga and Pilates because my body was sore and my mind was racing. I need everything to slow down and to become more flexible. And that's not something I would have ever done 10, 20 years ago. But as I get older, I'm open to more things. And I think it's great to hear your story of wellness, because it just promotes to guys that we don't have to be this cookie cutter version of masculinity. It's not, if I can't play footy anymore because my hamstrings will just ping just like that. I can do running. Like similar to you, I go to the gym and I get bored very quickly because I don't connect with it. I can lift the heavy stuff, but it just doesn't connect with me and I get bored. So great to hear your diversity of your wellness. And I'm looking forward to that next video you do on wellness on your Instagram. So
it'll be good. And like a big part of my role is almost giving people permission to make a different choice. So choices around their addictive behavior, choices around their relationships, and choices around their comfort zone. Like I said, I went floating yesterday, and I did take one of my my participants, and he's like, I never would have done this. And I'm like, did you love it? And he's like, I loved it. I asked him what he thought about it, and he loved it, and it's like, and I mean, if you look, I'll be just mindful of privacy. Like, it's the same thing. It's that trajectory. It's like
Mm.
when you go through life, you tick boxes and you follow pathways, right? And what I see, like I was talking to someone actually this morning, right? And I'm sitting across from this person who is like incredibly intelligent, incredibly creative, really soft, really connected, but completely disconnected, right? And works in a trade, and I'm not sure how he got there. And like, if you looked at him, you'd be like, yeah, that guy's like an architect or, you
Yeah.
know, like a graphic designer or something like. So it's like I meet so many people that have followed a pathway, but it's not their pathway.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they
Yeah.
get into this dissonance. Like I've done everything. I bought the investment property. I got married. I did the job that was going to provide, and I went to the school that I was supposed to. And why do I feel so desperately unhappy? And why am I hiding from my life? It looks so great.
Mm.
Yeah. And then you get to the crux of it, and sometimes it's like, well, I didn't actually want to do any of that stuff. I wanted to be a you know, an Egyptologist, or I wanted to be a musician, or
Yeah.
I wanted to be something else. And it's like we have to start giving permission to people to do what they want to do in their hearts, right? And I think everything will get slightly better. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm just trying to take people by the hand and show them what's out there.
Yeah. Now we've had a rough few years. We've had COVID. We
Mm,
had the bushfires as well, up in New South Wales, or pretty much everywhere. With the floods
yeah.
recently up our way, and into New South Wales, starting to come out of COVID, coming out of lockdowns, and all this type of thing. And have you noticed the impact of COVID or these natural disasters on in the addiction world, or what
Yeah.
kind of trends are you seeing over the last couple years in the work that you
Two,
do?
two things I'll point out. The first one is like capacity. So like if I use the word inundated, I wouldn't be using a strong enough word.
Mm.
Understanding that I have relationships with rehabilitation centers and my work, and like people are really, really struggling. There's been some interesting, statistics around alcohol increase and drug use through COVID. But what I can tell you from being on the ground is that it's rampant, and people leaned on it because they didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And they leaned on it because it was sold to them so aggressively during COVID, which is disgraceful,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So, if you're out there and you're responsible for that, then, you know,
Yeah.
have a think about it. We all saw it. It was like, door to door delivery, like, and it has affected people's lives so much. And what has gone from like weekend drinking has gone to weekly drinking, which has gone to drugs. Like, I have worked with people recently that would never, ever, ever, ever have established a chronic addiction if it weren't for that
Mm.
scenario,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then the second thing that I want to talk about is the attachment to identity, right? And, one of the best pieces of guidance I ever got was to keep my identity small
Mhm.
and not, think of myself as one thing, right? I'm a musician. I help people. I'm a creator. I'm a lots of things. So for the people that were just one thing and they bet everything on it, and their whole life revolved around this persona and this identity, and then suddenly COVID came and just went, right? Oh, you're a cafe owner? Not anymore, right? Or you do this, or and like, I'm not singling people out. I'm just saying that some people were so severely affected by it that their whole identity was just
Mm.
wiped out.
Yeah.
Okay, like people who were like, I saw this a lot in like finance as well, right? So guys that were just like, their thing was like getting on the phones and making deals and ringing the bell, and all of a sudden they couldn't do that. They were just sitting at home, and they're like, well, what goes on now?
Yeah.
And that has really derailed a lot of people. So it's the isolation, the access to drugs and alcohol, and also the identity kind of crises that have occurred around it. So it's been a massive problem. And the good news around that is that if people can come and get the care they need quickly, they can get back to a base level.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like if you're smashing drugs or smashing alcohol because of you started in COVID, we could probably help you today, right? And get you back to a base level of health and happiness quickly.
Yeah.
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 Because you haven't been doing it for 15 years.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, it rocks people and it happens really, really quickly. So it's been a very, very challenging period.
Yeah. Wow. Like, yeah, I didn't even think like that identity concept.
Massive.
I remember seeing like the news, and it was either news about no toilet paper, or it was news about people lining up at the grog shop, basically.
Yeah.
And that's the images that we portrayed out into the world. And but this sense of identity, it's a really powerful message you've got there, mate.
Yeah. And all of that media stuff gave people permission to drink themselves to a stupor, right? It's like when they started doing the toilet paper stuff, everyone started going out and trying to buy toilet paper. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
No, it didn't make any sense.
You know what? I want to go back to that previous question you asked me. You know what the best thing I've ever done for my health, happiness, and well-being is? Right? I have not owned a television for the last 10 years.
Really? Wow.
I don't have one. And it's the first thing people come into my apartment and they're like, where's the television? I'm like, I don't have a fucking television.
Wow.
Like, I'm not turning that on. I'm not listening to it. I'm not buying into the fear. I'm not buying into any of it. Okay? Yeah. Like, I'm really selective about what comes into my ears and my brain. And yeah.
I remember going in the first year of COVID, my wife and I would watch the daily news updates. And after a while, it just got so much and so depressing that we just turned it off. And I mean, now these days with the kids, it's pretty much just kid shows all the time. But I don't even bother watching the news anymore. I just can't digest it anymore. I just need.
Look, I'm not saying that's for everyone. I live a bit like a bit of a monk lifestyle, right? But like, if you know what you can do, and I encourage people to do this when I talk about developing habits that stick, is to work on distractions. You know, and one of the key things is television. So just like taking a blanket and putting it over the television, right? Taking the chocolate that's inside and putting it at the back of the cupboard, like just getting things out of your mind and out of view is good. So I'm still working on the social media thing. I have to get off my phone a bit more. I'm not perfect.
It's addictive in itself. You know, I'm the same. Like I probably spend too much time on it. But also I'm doing it with a purpose. I'm finding I'm doing it to help other boys and men to open up, and women as well to open up as well. Now, drawing on your experience, your lived experience and your professional experience, do you have any advice on how someone could approach a conversation about addiction? So it might be with somebody, their family or friend, who might be noticing some things. Is there any advice that you could provide to someone who might be wanting to reach out and help them, but not sure how?
Yeah, I think like it varies, right? And I think that like sometimes taking a direct approach is good. And I think the other thing that is really helpful as well, if you're not prepared to have a direct conversation or if the person is sensitive, is to engage them with what they're not doing, right? So you might, and this is not in a judgmental way, like, oh, I thought you were going to like, you know, play A grade footy this year and you're sitting on your ass, you know? And that's not the way that the conversation should go, right? But it might be like, you know, talking about the aspiration. Hey, I bumped into, you know, so-and-so down the shops and he's playing A grade. He seems pretty happy. Like, is that something that you're still looking to connect with? And the person might go, oh yeah, I really did want to do that. And then it's another thing, right? That might be like, oh, we kind of like, you know, it might be a holiday or it might be a plan, right? And if you can start painting a picture about the things that the person is not engaged with anymore, and then go in and say, what's the thing? What's the thing that's stopping you from doing all of this, right? And they'll either get really defensive and go, fuck off, nothing, right? Or they'll go, oh, you know what? It's probably X. Yeah? And if they're at that point where they're prepared to go, yes, it's affecting my life, my finances, my relationships, my happiness, my mental health, then you've got them in a perfect spot to get them the help that they need,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And before that, it's hard, and after that, it's too late. So timing is everything. And people will let you know that they're receptive because they'll either isolate to the point where you have to go get them, or they'll start poking their head out and going, hey, I'm really fucked and I need help, but I can't admit it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? And that's why that "are you okay" question is a great one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really think it's about painting the picture of what their potential is, talking about where they are now and figuring out what the gap is. Like, what's the thing that's stopping you?
Yeah. And would that be the same kind of message to someone who might be listening now, who's got the phone next to them, ready to dial the number to Addiction Coaching Australia or another provider? Would that be the same message? If what, like trying to get them over the line to actually dial the number, what would you say to them?
Totally. Like, it's the key thing that I always ask, right? It's like the checklist, right? Are you mentally and physically well? No. Do you have money in the bank? No, but I earn, 100 grand a year, but I'm broke. And how are your relationships? Oh, I've got a beautiful wife and two young kids, but they don't talk to me at the moment. How's your relationship with yourself? And if all of those are crosses, then they really need to get some help. And what I want to say to people is that I think it's brave, right? Like, it's the bravest thing you'll ever do in your life is to actually put up your hand and go, I'm fucked. I need some help. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get me, moving towards a life worth living, right? It is very, very hard to do because there is stigma. Yeah. Like, even, and this is crazy. Like, I work with a lot of people who work in trades.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're either on the ground doing the stuff, or they're project managing it, or they're owning the companies that are having people do the work. But there's this culture there where everyone talks about drugs and everyone's doing drugs. But sometimes when people go to get the help they need, they're ostracized for, being better than, or, it's crazy. So you can be judged. Perception of family is a massive one. What's my grandmother going to think? What's my mum going to think? What is, my boss going to think? And that's part of the work I do now. It's like when I talk to people who are employers, right? I'm like, you better be prepared because you're going to have lots of these conversations. And the way you react to them is going to say a lot about you as a leader.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Because like drug addicts or people with substance misuse issues, they're people like me. They're people like you. They're people like, it's not that thing where you walk past someone and they're, sleeping on a park bench. Like, it's everyone. And it is so prevalent. And we're not at the point yet where people feel comfortable talking about it. So what I would say is find a trusted friend, practice on them, right? And this is the trajectory I see a lot of. So it's like a person might talk to his girlfriend, or a person might talk to their friend, and then that person gets in touch with me. Yeah. And also, like, through social media, like some of the best participants that I've worked with, some of the most dedicated people are the people that have seen something and sent me a DM, right? And then 2 days later, I'm on a call with them, and then the next day we're getting the work done,
Yeah, wonderful.
They're kind of action orientated, and they don't have to tell anyone except me.
Yeah.
So like working with me, there's no public record, there's no, like going out and telling the world. You can just come and get it done, right? And I value people's privacy and work with the highest level of ethical standards that I know how, because I just want you to get back to yourself and to your family and to your happiness.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you mentioned social, so appreciate Sunday afternoon. We're about to let you go, but this is your time now to plug whatever you want. We follow each other on Instagram, and this is where we've connected. And I love seeing your journey on Instagram as well. But yeah, feel free to let us know where we can find you on Instagram, on the internet, or something you're reading at the moment, something you're watching. Oh, you're not watching TV, obviously.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, I've got some great ones. So I'll start with a bit of value, right?
Mhm.
And I guess like I'm reading a great book called The Alter Ego Effect
Okay.
by Todd. Someone just look it up on Amazon. Incredible book about peak performance, which I really love. If you want to, get started on like reconnecting to simple things that will get you aligned with values and actually showing up as a human being, and you're into sports, I love Legacy by Frank Kerr. This guy followed the New Zealand rugby team around for like 4 years, and has linked their performance back to like 7 core values, right? Simple things like cleaning up after yourself and, like incredible book. I love Atomic Habits by James Clear. I love The Compound Effect, which is kind of an offshoot of that. I can't remember who wrote it. I read a fantastic book on ADHD recently called ADHD 2.0.
Mhm.
So anyone who's going through that or wanting to learn about it, that's very concise and very, very good. My favorite meditation resources is it's called Insight Timer, free app on the App Store. I've been into the tapping solution, right,
Mhm.
which is like meridian tapping points for anxiety and stress. Very, very good. What else am I kind of tapped into at the moment? Huberman Labs podcast I really like.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, he's smart, right? And he has amazing guests. And look, it's a little bit heavy, but there's so much shit on the internet, like just people kind of fronting up and like buying lights and going, listen to me because I'm the loudest, right? And what I'm trying to connect with is like people who are actually the smartest, and have the most to share. In terms of my socials, like I've got heaps of stuff in it. At the moment, I'm in the process of consolidating it all.
Yeah.
Okay. So like I guess the true source of like connecting with me and what I'm doing and what's on my mind is at Conrad M Tracey on Instagram. I have a website, but like it needs updating, and it's just like this thing that I'm going to do later.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm show up there every day. So if you want to jump on there, you can. I'm also on Facebook, but I have found that the people that I connect with and help with the most on Insta. In terms of what's going on, so like my private practice at the moment, like Delta Path, I actually have, there's a fair waiting list for people to work with me one on one. So that's kind of like into probably like July this year.
Yeah.
Which is good for me, I guess, and good for the people that like realize the value in it and kind of got engaged with it. The group coaching program, we've got another one starting in 4 weeks.
Mhm.
And that is excellent,
Yeah.
right? So anybody who wants to dip their toe in, can't go to rehab, is having issues, like this is a really, really accessible way to get help. Everything in there is quick, punchy, small bits of learning. It's not like you have to go in and do a PhD, right? Like 30-minute videos, great community. And that's a really simple process. Like in my link tree or whatever it is, the bio thing,
Mhm.
you can read about that program. You can book a free discovery session with me. But what I would say is this: if you book one, show up, and if you don't show up, I'm not gonna talk to you again, right? Unless you let me know why you didn't come and give me a valid excuse, right?
Yeah.
It really pisses me off when people don't come. And it's not because of my ego, it's because I could be talking to someone who actually really needs help,
Yeah.
right? So I'm trying to keep that free. And when people show up, it's easier. So group coaching program starts in 4 weeks, really accessible, very, very affordable, incredible community. And if you just want to start tapping into like learning about this stuff, figuring it out, trying to get a gauge for where you're at, then the Instagram is really good. I'm really like, I do my best to be as generous as possible with learning information and resources. So
Yeah.
there's heaps of free stuff there.
Wonderful. Well, Conrad, appreciate your time this Arvo. I've learned a lot, but I've also really enjoyed our conversation. So thank you so much for taking some time out of your Sunday afternoon. I really do appreciate it.
Mate, it's my pleasure. I hope that it helps. I can't wait to meet you in person. I've actually got some family up there, so I'm going to come and
Awesome.
say hello. And there's a couple of other people in Brisbane that I've met online that I've got to, and Queensland that I've got to connect with. So we'll meet each other in person, and good luck with everything that you're doing. I think it's fantastic.
Cheers. Thank you so much. Wonderful.
Awesome. See you, mate.
See ya. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure that you like it and leave a comment, and then share it with your mates. Also, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a moment of future episodes to come.